Today, I want to talk to you about something that is fundamental to regression work, and that is parts work. Now, Fritz Perls is the father of Gestalt therapy, and he recognized that we have many parts. Parts are what make up our personality, and for Perls, the goal of therapy was what he called the Gestalt. Gestalt means integrated whole, the whole that is greater than the sum of its parts, so all our parts. Virginia Satir created what was called family therapy system, and it's a system that works with parts of a person as well. Satir developed what she called a parts party, where you could work with multiple parts all at the same time. There are lots of systems that work with parts. There's internal family systems therapy that was developed by Richard Schwartz, for example. Voice dialogue work, which is the work of Hal and Cedra Stone. John and Helen Watkins did a study at Stanford University, and they published their findings in a book called Ego States. Charles Tebbetts adapted parts work to hypnosis, and he called it parts therapy and passed the torch on to one of his students, which is C. Roy Hunter, and he continues to teach Tebbetts' approach to parts therapy. Transactional analysis defines three primary parts of a person, and these are the three parts that we tend to work with in regression. So that is the child part, the parent part, and then the adult or the grown-up part. John Bradford popularized inner child work, which is a part of us, the child. And so back in the 90s, Bradshaw was all the rage. He was on television, his programs were being aired, and he really made healing the inner child a very popular topic, and therapists started to take that on and work with their clients in healing the inner child. Parts therapy, theory recognizes that all parts of a person are good. So all our parts are good, even the bad ones, because every part serves a very important function. They form for a reason, and they serve a valuable purpose. Now, some of our parts feel good, and some of them feel not so good, but all of the parts of us are good. The goal is to get our parts working together, because when they're working together harmoniously as an integrated whole, the Gestalt, that's when we feel good. That's when we feel like we're at one with ourselves. You know, when that happens, when there's that connection that happens in a session, when parts come together, the client will often say, I feel like I got myself back. So, where do our parts come from? Well, parts are shaped in response to experiences early in life. The situations that were stressful, for example, whether they were confusing or frightening for the child, it caused the child to form parts as a way of coping with those situations. So you can think of parts as recordings. They're recordings of actual experiences that occurred earlier in life. A parent part is a recording of external experiences. These are the things that were said and the things that were done and what was modeled to the child at that time. Child parts are internal responses to whatever was happening at the time that they formed. Perceptions, thoughts, feelings in the body, that sort of thing. And over time, these develop into patterned responses. These are learned responses, and they become automatic responses to specific cues in our daily life. So they can be triggered. So when we're under pressure, for example, certain parts will step forward automatically to respond to that situation. And when that happens, they are said to be to become executive. So when a part steps forward, it is now executive. So later, a person will sometimes say, well, I don't know what came over me, or, oh, I sounded just like my mother, or, you know, I can't believe I ate the whole thing. This can be really disconcerting for a person, because that's when you realize that the conscious part of you, the conscious mind, wasn't in control. Parts are also known as subpersonalities or ego states, and so I like to make a distinction between parts and ego states. So this is just my take on it. Here's how I see it. Parts are what make up the critical function of the mind. They're all the parts of the personality, and together they form a person's lens on life. So the totality of our parts are the critical function, and that's our viewpoint on the world, our worldview, so to speak. And it's all based on our life experiences, so it's learned. Now, when a part steps forward, it becomes executive, and now it's an ego state. The person is literally in a state. So later they think back and they go, oh, I sounded just like my mother, because they were in that state. And it was simply expressing the recording that was held by that part. And then when the part steps back again and the conscious or executive ego becomes the conscious mind of the person, the one they're most accustomed to being at least, then they kind of come to their senses and wonder what happened. So the part is really an echo from the past, and we can follow that echo. We can follow it back to its inception. The most significant parts form prior to the critical function of the mind. So most of these recordings that we've acquired get installed before 5 to 6 years of age. A lot of them are even before 3 years of age. And these formed in response to specific needs of the child. Their function is always specific and it's always positive. Now, where parts can become problematic is when they get stuck. And they're stuck because the child didn't have support, the child lacked resources, wasn't able to make sense of things, and it didn't have any strategies to deal with what was happening or to be able to meet some important need. Not being able to meet your own needs, not being able to make sense of things or take action is perceived as a survival threat. So the part formed as a strategy based in those needs. The problem is that it's stuck in time. It's still trying to take care of the needs of the child at that age. And it only has the resources that the child had that were available to the child at that time. Now, Virginia Satir identified 4 patterned, what she called stances. These are defense mechanisms or survival strategies that are developed. And so these are 4 common ways that people will respond when they're under stress, basically. So it's kind of a conditioned response. And so people tend to respond in one of these 4 ways. It's either placating, blaming, super analytical, or irrelevant. James Redfield kind of echoed this in his book, Celestine Prophecy. He also had 4 patterns called control dramas. And these are but he described them rather than being a stress response in a certain situation. He described them as ways of getting energy when we're feeling disempowered. So it's kind of the same thing. I mean, if you're stressed out, you don't have enough energy to deal with the situation. And so these 4 states that these control dramas that he described were the poor me, the interrogator, the intimidator, and the aloof. So the poor me uses whining and complaining to get energy. And the interrogator uses questions, and they interrogate, and they demand logic and reason in order to be in control, to feel in control in a situation. The intimidator uses bullying. They use an authoritarian stance to get their needs met and be in charge and be in control of the situation. And the aloof, that's the person that withdraws. They disengage, they take some distance, and they just move away from the situation. So these are conditioned responses, and it's important to recognize that these are learned responses. They are how a person learned to cope under stressful conditions or situations of stress. And these are the echoes from the past. They connect with those stressful feelings, and so you can follow them back to whatever it was that happened that caused the part to form in the first place. Now, time is a construct of the conscious mind. The conscious mind uses time to organize information and events and make sense of things. So it's able to sequence them and put them in a linear sort of order so that this happens and therefore and because, and it's able to make sense of things. And that's the conscious mind's primary function, to make meaning of things. We are meaning makers, if nothing else. The subconscious mind has the reason and the logic of the child. And it's timeless. It's not logical. It's not rational. It's not concerned with past, present, and future. It's all happening now as far as it's concerned. So it's really timeless. So it has no problem with you being 5 months old and 5 years old and 50 years old all at the same time, which can be a little bit confusing, to the conscious mind. But as far as the subconscious mind is concerned, whatever's happening back then, it's happening still. And this is what makes regression work possible. We're not going anywhere. We're just bringing up that particular package of information into the conscious mind. So healing, in my perspective, is about reconnecting with who the child was before that threat was perceived, before they ever knew what it was like to feel confused or scared or powerless. And it's before they were able to, or were even aware that they were not able to meet their needs for safety and nourishment. And that's the underlying problem. The underlying problem is that experiences in life caused us to disconnect from that awareness of who we really are. Really are. The truth of who we are at our core. But the thing is, we're never really disconnected. It's our awareness that disconnects. It's our awareness that got blocked. And so that gets identified as a feeling of something missing. Now, we made certain decisions about ourselves and about others and about life in general before we were able to make sense of the world. Those decisions are what form parts of us. And these parts continue to decide how we think, how we feel, how we respond to situations in life on a day-to-day basis. Share your comments on the forum. And give me an idea of how you can use this information in your sessions with clients. And until next time, this is Wendie signing off. I'll see you again real soon.